Hey up everybody and welcome back. Well, I'm sure you're all confused as to why there's a video on Wednesday. But there's a perfectly good reason for this. Well, two reasons really. And I thought I'd just put a short video up to cover a couple of points of confusion. Now the first confusion is from myself. Because the way the engine and everything's going, I've got a little out of sync with the work I'm doing, the videos that are out, the comments about that videos, my replies, etc. So I wanted to just let you know that I'm not missing out on comments and things like that. And a bunch of what people have mentioned, I've already you'll see in the next video or the next couple of videos. And they are things that I have mentioned before, so people have maybe just missed them. But anyway, things like the oil tank and stuff like that. But the main confusion is about the lubrication system. So I wanted to go with that because the comments have got a little bit tetchy. Now, I've had a couple of trolls over the years, and I don't mind them because it's the internet. It doesn't really exist. I mean, they're not going to come around break my windows, are they? Cyberbullying, what a crock that is. So anyway, but the thing is, you're starting to get a bit tetchy amongst yourselves. So don't do that, fellas, please. Alright, so why is the confusion about this? Well, there are some differences between the Redditch Enfields and the Madras Enfields. They look identical to a great extent, well in fact almost to a complete extent. They use the same system and the same components, but the early Madras engines and even the Redditch ones are slightly different. And then of course we have the other confusion that people have maybe thinking of 350 Enfields and thinking of the Clipper and stuff like that. So we're going to make a two-pronged attempt to do this. Now, when I wanted to explain the lubrication system, in order to make sure that I understood it, I went to Pete Snydell's book, because a lot of bullet owners use that, and there's a nice diagram. And I'm going to reproduce that diagram. See, I'm going to put myself at risk of jail and fines. In a minute you're going to see that diagram, and I'll explain, hopefully with a voiceover, the way the system is shown in that. But then I'm going to pull out the other pair of cases I have and show you the way the system is on this engine. Because as I say, it might not be the same, exactly the same on the Clippers, it might not be exactly the same on the Madras engines, or even the 500 end bullets, I don't know. So we're going to have an actual engine to look at. So let's get on with that. Here's a little bit of information for you to do with editing. This is the third time I've filmed this little intro, because every time when I've looked at it I've made a complete balls up of what I was saying. So anyway, first off, let's have a look at the diagram that I used to explain this lubrication system. Right, here's the diagram I used. So bottom center, you'll see we've got our oil tank. We'll go through the filter in the bottom left of the oil tank and into the feed pump. And as I say, there are two sort of feeds because it's an oscillating pump. So it goes out of that pump, up to the filter, which is about in the middle of the picture, into the quill, into the crankshaft, through the big end and back down into the crankcase. Then you'll see it going through another little gauze, and it goes across the bottom to the return pump. Here the return pump just sends it all up to the rockers. It comes down into the timing chest and then through the hole back into the oil tank. Now there was some mention of the hole being a breather, but obviously as you'll see when I show you the drill ways, it can't really be a breather because it's connected completely to the return. So there's oil flowing down that into the tank all the time, either from the pressure relief return valve or from what you see there in the timing chest. And you can see the two wheels there that we left in. Alright, so I'll give you a little while to look at that again. So it's oil tank across into the feed pump, up through the filter into the crank, down into the crankcase, out of the bottom of there into the return pump, up to the rockers, down through the push rod tubes, and then through that hole and returned to the oil tank. Right, now you've seen the way it was laid out in the diagram, so let's look at the actual engine. I apologise for it being dirty, but I just sort of pulled it out of storage. Alright, oil tank. As we pointed out, it's cast in, but it is dry sump. There's where the oil comes out of the oil tank, goes up through that filter and into the pump through this hole. Everything is fine to there. Goes through the filter, goes through the crank, comes out the big end, goes into the bottom, gets sucked up through here. I'm gonna have to keep looking at the camera to make sure I've got you in sight here. Up here, back into the pump. Now we get to the problem. According to Pete Snydell, the pump, you'll notice on his diagram as well, it has two lines. That's because of the oscillating pump, which I perhaps didn't really explain well enough. But they both went up through there to the rockers, down the rockers, through there, into here, and through that hole. But if you look, you'll see that there. This is what, oh God, I forgot, it was Rotax or whatever, one of the two-stroke guys mentioned. In there goes a ball and a spring and what looks like a banjo bolt. So when the oil is pumped up here, there is a back pressure, and some of it goes up to the rockers, but when the pressure gets to a certain amount, it pushes the ball out, and although you can't see it, there's a drilling here which comes along and joins in with the drilling from there, which goes back into the tank. And I will prove that now with our good old bit of yellow paper by putting air on where the pressure release valve goes in. So you see it's joining up with this, which has the drilling that goes back into the oil tank. So hold on a second. Alright, I've pulled out a pair of BSA cases because I wanted to just explain what's meant by scavenge feed, and it's also a sort of external view of what's internal on the Enfield cases. This is the feed to the oil pump. This is the return from the oil pump. You can actually see here, I think, where are we? Yeah, that's the pickup for the return. So the oil is fed in just the same as on the Enfield. It goes into the end of the crankshaft under pressure, does the big end, comes out, comes down into the sump. It's sucked up here and it goes into the return side of the pump. And again, the return side is going to pump a bigger volume of oil. Now, there's a correlation between volume, pressure, and orifice, i.e. the size of the pipe. Just think about putting your finger over the end of the hose pipe. So a scavenge is taken off the main flow. In other words, it's not a direct flow. This is pumping through that quill directly. It's under major pressure. But here, what you've got is enough oil flowing through here from that bigger capacity side of the pump, and in this instance, just simply the head of it going up to the oil tank. But don't forget, in the Enfield, we've actually got a ball valve, which I just showed you. So the pressure builds up and builds up in this. This little one here goes up to the rockers. There is enough pressure to not only return oil to the tank, but also to push some up to the rockers, because this doesn't need to be much of a feed at all. In fact, as I always like to do, this has got the old herringbone one on. I always put clear tube on, and you'll see it just the same as I mentioned before on the return side. It spurts up here. It goes up, there's a gap, it goes up, there's a gap. So this is just scavenging off the main return. So in the Enfield engine, this, if you like, is the drill way, which goes to the tank. In it, there's a little ball valve. So until that ball valve lifts, there's oil going up to the rockers. And then when the pressure builds up enough, it lifts and it just carries on to there. But it'll still continue feeding this. But of course, once it's opened and there's good flow, then again we get to this orifice pressure flow thing, it'll close again. So there's always enough pressure in this system to return oil and to feed the rockers. Okay, that's as much as I'm going to say. I don't know if it's cleared it up or if it's confused you even more. But obviously there are just simply differences in the Enfields, and as always, just think about the engine you're working on. So what we're doing on that bullet is right for that bullet. I can't say about other ones. So okay, it's lunchtime and I'm off to enjoy my lunch, so you people go off and enjoy whatever it is you're going to do. See you at the weekend.